How about now? Yeah, we're live now. Great. So good evening, everyone. My name is Shannon Anderson. I serve as a deputy city manager here for the city of Flagstaff. Just have a few housekeeping items this morning. Did I say this morning? It sounds like it's live from up here. How about now? All right. Let's start over. My name is Shannon Anderson. I'm one of the deputy city managers here for the city of Flagstaff. I have just a few housekeeping items for you before we get started. First is we've had some questions about where the noise study is located on our website, so I wanted to share that with you. This is the home page, so when you go to the flagstaffaz.gov, this is what page you'll see. If you scroll down to the media releases, there's the City of Flagstaff announces town hall. If you click on that link, you will see the noise study here. If you click on this link, we are recording today for those who can't make it or for those who might have to leave early. And so that will be embedded on this same page. So you'll know where to find that as well. A couple of other just quick housekeeping items. Once we're done with all of the presentations, we will allow for comment as well as questions. For those of you that are in the audience here, please just raise your hand. We have a mic that will be circulating around the room, so we'll get that mic to you so everyone can hear you. For those of you who are participating online, you can use the hand raise function or the chat, and I will be monitoring that in order to call on you when it's your turn for comment or question. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Laswicki.
Hi, my name is Paul Laswicki. I'm the Deputy Chief of Support Services at the Flagstaff Police Department. With me is Sam Hord. He is a representative from the sound consultant who conducted the sound study that's going to guide the elements of the city's nuisance noise ordinance. Also along with me tonight is the Flagstaff Police Department's legal advisor and author of the ordinance, Marianne Sullivan, and our Chief of Police, Chief Musselman.
192 miles for them. It's 200.
Before we get into the formal town hall operation of this meeting, I think it'd probably be helpful to provide a little background on how we got here, what the problem was that led to this discussion, as well as provide some foundational information about the ordinance and how it might be enforced. So in 2019, some citizens got together and presented a petition to our council entitled Intentional Noise Pollution. It was about how people can alter their cars to intentionally make their cars sound louder. Maybe you remember at the end of 2019, we ran into a little global pandemic called COVID-19. Well, that kind of put everything on hold for a good year, and the council wasn't really able to get around to addressing the intentional noise pollution petition until June of 2021, when they requested a draft nuisance noise ordinance be authored by the police department. So in September 2021, the initial draft of the ordinance was presented to council, and they directed us to come back and talk about it in a work session so that it could be further discussed. We did that in January 25th of 2022 this year, and at the conclusion of that, the city council requested a sound study. So the city hired MD Acoustics, represented by Sam Hord here, and they conducted a noise study, or a sound study, and that was presented to the police department, and we passed it along to the city in June of 2022. Since then, in order to kind of solicit input from members of the community, about how they would like their ordinance drafted, and what elements they would like to see in their ordinance. We held 2 Coffee with a Cop events, did some other community outreach, including a Southside Neighborhood Sound Study discussion meeting. And now we're here to try and solicit a little bit more information to see how you guys want your ordinance to look. So, although we haven't yet completed writing the ordinance, I can answer a few questions about what the ordinance might look like. For example, how will sound levels be measured? To provide some of this context, I'd like to go over some very basic properties of sound. For example, when I say sound, what do I mean? Sound's produced by a series of compressions through the air. The more energy that's used to cause the air to compress, the more intense the waves of compressed air, the larger the wave amplitude, the louder the sound. For our purposes, we measure intensity of compressed air, or how loud the sound is, in units called decibels. Just to offer a little frame of reference, 0 decibels is about the average threshold for human hearing, meaning we can't hear any of the air compressed that's below 0 decibels of intensity. On the other hand, 140 decibels is the average threshold for pain. That is, at 140 decibels and greater, the air compressions are so intense that they cause pain to our ears. Unwanted sound is referred to as noise. In addition to a sound's intensity or loudness, we also have different options on how to measure different qualities of sound. Specifically, we can weigh sound levels based on the scale of the sound's pitch or wavelength, or high or low the tone is. While there are a wide range of perceptible sound scales, there are 2 sound scales that represent the industry standard by which sounds are measured. That's the A scale and the C scale, and we call those dBA and dBc, respectively. Sound levels are most commonly measured using an A-weighted scale because the A scale most closely approximates the human perception of sound. A scale weighting does this by kind of filtering out the lower frequency sounds, the lower pitches, that we don't typically perceive as a problem at lower intensities. Although we don't perceive them as a problem at lower intensities, at higher intensities, when these low pitched sounds get very loud, we're much more sensitive to those same low frequencies at these higher intensities, like the thump, thump, thump of a loud bass subwoofer, or the rumbling of a commercial tractor trailer when it's using its engine brake. Measurements of high-intensity, low-frequency sounds are best captured using a C scale weighting. That's the dBc that we would measure. Here's some generalizations of a range of common decibel levels. So another question that we can answer right now is what kind of sound measurement device are we going to be using to measure our sound levels? Sound level measuring device that we're going to be using is going to be a Casella Cell 24X. And that's got an ANSI, American National Standards Institute Type 2 rating, which means that it's accurate to a plus or minus 2 decibel or less. It's capable of recording both dBA and dBc weighted measurements. It will capture average sound levels over time, as well as impulse sound levels, the impulse sound levels that are almost instantaneous. Our officers are going to be required to be certified in the operation of the sound meters before they'll be allowed to use them in an investigation. Every sound level meter comes with its own calibration instrument, and the officers will be required to calibrate the sound level meter before each use. Another question that I can also answer is what's a typical nuisance noise ordinance investigation going to look like? First off, it's going to be in response to a call for service. Some citizen calls in complaints that what they're hearing is too loud for them. So the Flagstaff Police Department's not going to go around with our little sound meters trying to self-initiate a nuisance noise ordinance investigation. We're only going to respond to calls for service or noise complaints. So when we receive a loud noise complaint from a citizen, the officer is going to be dispatched to contact the reporting person. If there's no reporting person to contact, for example, if it's a Crime Stop caller, or if the caller wants to remain anonymous, we won't record their name. The officer is going to be investigating that incident as a disorderly conduct, which is a misdemeanor crime, and it falls back on that old standard that we're trying to move away from, which is a level of reasonableness that's kind of based on the opinion of the officer that's there at that moment. At that point, the officer is going to activate his or her body camera. The officer is going to interview the reporting person and or any other witnesses that may be appropriate. If the reported offense is ongoing at the time, that means that there's a loud noise being played or produced at the time the officer is there, then the officer is going to have to identify the primary source of the offending noise. Do that by walking around the neighborhood and saying it's coming from this garage or this place over here. The officer, who again is going to be certified in the operation of the sound level meter, will calibrate the sound meter in the field of view of the body camera, so on camera. The officer is going to stand at the required location for measuring the noise according to the ordinance, whatever we decide is going to be a reasonable distance to measure that sound from. And the officer is going to continue to wait at that required location until whatever time is required by the ordinance. And again, we haven't completed writing the ordinance yet, so whatever we decide as a community is going to be the best amount of time to measure that sound. That's how long the officer is going to stay there. The officer is going to wait at the required location for the source noise to stop, and then take another sound level measurement to capture the level of ambient sound absent the source sound. If the source noise continues without stopping, so the officer is unable to get an on-site but off-source reading or measurement, then the officer is going to have to do something else, which means that they're going to have to move to another location that they're not picking up the source sound, but it's going to be a very close approximation to the ambient noise around it. So they'll have to take an approximate ambient noise reading. If the officer determines at that time that a violation of the nuisance noise ordinance has occurred, then the officer will consider the totality of the circumstances and then take whatever enforcement action is appropriate. Over the course of developing the nuisance noise ordinance, the police department and the city officials have fielded several questions, comments, and concerns about the ordinance, including these on this slide. I'll just leave this up for a while, and I will introduce Sam to talk about the study itself, and he can answer any questions about the study. Sam?
You're welcome. Excellent presentation. So, my name is Samuel Horde. I'm from Mesa, Arizona. My company was hired to come in as a third party to provide sort of an unbiased measurement of the existing noise condition in the city of Flagstaff. My team spent a good deal of time measuring the noise level at 43 different locations throughout the city at a variety of uses, everything from parks to railroad intersections and in between. So yeah, our methodology was, hey, let's get out there, let's calibrate our sound level meters, let's make sure that we understand what the noise level is already, and then we looked at existing noise ordinances in other cities, and in our line of work, we do work in dozens of cities throughout the country. And just over the course of a year, like I myself read through a lot of different noise ordinances in different cities. So, and I'm just one person on my team. We also have Claire, Robert, Francisco, a whole team of people who are working on projects throughout the country, everywhere from San Francisco, California to Trenton, New Jersey, and Mundelein, Illinois. Large cities, small cities, you name it. We've read tons of noise ordinances, and so we're very familiar with what is out there and existing, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so drawing on our experience, we provided recommendations based on the noise levels that we're seeing here in the city of Flagstaff, and also considering like the unique character of the city of Flagstaff. It's not the same as LA or as Mesa or Paradise Valley. It's its own high altitude college city up here with, we've got a lot of major roadways and rail intersections. So we considered all of those in our findings. And that was our basic process for the recommendations that we provided. Has anyone here looked at the ordinance and come tonight, or looked at our sound study and come here tonight with specific questions that I could answer? Go ahead. I can go over the study in more detail. What do you want?
I would maybe go to page 11 of the study where it talks about some of your recommendations. Page 11 and 12, I think that's the meat.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to skip over anything.
Since I haven't looked at it, I apologize for that, but did you also measure the sound levels in residential areas that you would consider already fairly quiet?
Absolutely. So since not everyone here has read the study and been to 3 different public outreach meetings, why don't I go over the study a little bit in a little bit more detail, just so that we're all kind of on the same footing for the questions that will be asked. Okay. I apologize. I went a little too fast. Okay. So, so let me talk about sort of some of the different categories of places that we measured, right? We measured 43 different locations at different times of the day, including at nights when there's not a lot going on. So in our study, our first table is park noise measurements. We measured Wheeler Park, we measured Thorpe Park, we went up on Mars Hill, we measured Heritage Square, and we measured Fox Glen Park. We were able to measure Wheeler Park during the festival and at a time and on a Tuesday morning when there was no festival going on. So we did that to get a sense of like, what's the noise level at and around parks? And especially Flagstaff has big events, Hullabaloo Festival. We were actually hired by the city a number of years ago to monitor noise levels at Hullabaloo. So the noise levels that we measured varied from a quiet day in Thorpe Park of 59 dB to Wheeler Park during the festival was like 74 dB. So these are kind of the range of measurements from a quiet Tuesday morning to like Saturday afternoon, 3:41 at Hullabaloo Festival. Okay. And in our study, we have maps showing with pins showing the locations of what was measured. We show the day, the time, and the levels that were measured. Okay. So when an officer responds to a complaint and he pulls out a sound level meter, that sound level meter picks up all the sound from sources near and far. Okay. So to understand the sound level, the existing sound levels, we also wanted to measure the noise levels from traffic. So we went to several major intersections throughout the city, both during rush hour times between 5 and 7 p.m. and during times that are not rush hour, like 10:50 in the morning when, the people that are going to work have already gone and it's more of a quieter traffic pattern. So we measured the noise level at Switzer in the 66, I-40 in Butler, San Francisco and Butler, Laurel and Aspen. We measured the train crossing, both when there was a train and when there was no train, just so we have an understanding of the traffic noise levels through the city. We also measured residential uses, to come to your point. We measured residential uses that are in the downtown area, both during the day and at night. We measured uses that are close to several of the bars that are out here. We measured close to other venues, Annex Patio. We measured neighborhoods at Cherry Hill, the end of Butler Avenue, Jay Lively, Jim Collin Park, Pine Canyon. We went way up in Pine Canyon, and the day that we were measuring, there was construction noise going on. And we said, oh, this is perfect, because a noise ordinance should provide exemptions for construction noise, or else no one will ever get anything built. But we have a construction noise measurement there, so as you look at the study and you're wondering, well, what levels are typical associated with construction? We've got that in there too. We measured by Southside Tavern, both on a busy Saturday night and on idle day. Our measurements, like of Southside Tavern, were in June. Funny thing about Flagstaff is June is not the busiest time of year, so it gives us a good baseline of what the quietest we would expect it to be there would be when they're operating. So we measured Upper Green Law residential, Walnut Canyon residential. So if you look at the map on this one, you'll see the pins are all over. We wanted to get a good idea, because not all the neighborhoods in Flagstaff are the same level of loudness, based on proximity to roadways, based on proximity to other businesses, based on other factors such as that affect the noise.
I just have a quick question about
Okay.
decibels, and I appreciate that Chief trying to explain it.
I'm sorry, can you wait and ask questions after we're done? Do you want to have a microphone so that everyone can hear?
That's fine, we're talking about numbers, and I'm trying to understand the numbers. I mean, I guess I could wait, but.
Yeah, if you can, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, decibels are on a logarithmic scale. Higher is louder.
Is 100 twice as loud as 50?
No, 100 is a lot louder than 50. 53 is twice as loud as 50.
There you go.
I just think that matters for the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Sam, if we're going to have comments in the middle of the presentation, if you can repeat it, because again, it's not on mic, the people online can't hear
Oh.
what you're talking about.
Thank you, Sharon. So to repeat the question was, is 100 decibels twice as loud as 50? The answer is no. 53 decibels is twice as loud as 50. Decibels are on a logarithmic scale, and so doubling and halving doesn't work like traditional addition and subtraction. So thank you for that question. So we also measured commercial noise from a whole number of places, including Collins Irish Pub, Southside Tavern, the Mayor, Annex Patio, Orpheum, Yucca, Lumberyard Patio, Flag Brew Patio. We measured at Safeway, we measured at Target. We got a good picture of commercial establishments and the noise levels that are existing there. So with all of those measurements, it was a ton of data. If you try to download the PDF, you might have trouble. It was such a big file size. Our report came down to 13 pages, and then there's 170 pages or so of field sheets with all of the measurement data in it, which was provided to the city and to the citizens of Flagstaff. Okay. So with all of those measurements in mind, and with our background of knowledge studying noise ordinances from different cities, we provided recommendations to the city of Flagstaff to inform them as they go through the process of creating noise nuisance legislation. So yeah, our role in this was to be a third party and to say, this is what we would recommend based on what we're seeing with the data that we've collected, and based on what we're seeing around the country, what other cities and municipalities are doing with regard to their noise ordinances. So We also look, a couple of noise ordinances that we wanted to bring to the attention of city officials are noise ordinances for the city of Sedona, just because it's also in Arizona and it's out of the valley. It's similar but different than Flagstaff. And another noise ordinance we brought to their attention is the noise ordinance from the city of Boulder, Colorado. Similar size college city. Okay. And those are just two of hundreds of examples that you can look at and look for yourself at noise ordinances. So with all of those measurements in mind, these are the recommendations that we provided. Number one, we recommend noise limits that are based on the zoning. Okay. We recommend separate residential, mixed use, commercial, and industrial limits for the receiving properties. Mixed use receivers would include residential uses within non-residential zones. Commercial receivers include public facilities such as parks. We recommend that where two different uses are adjacent to each other, the quieter noise limit be applied. That's considered industry best practice. If you have an industrial zone next to a commercial zone, usually the commercial limit is lower, and that's the one that would be applied in that case. Same with commercial next to industrial or residential. Or sorry, same with residential next to a commercial. We recommend both a DBA and a DBC noise limit for the LEQ noise limit. This is jargon pertinent to how the sound is measured. In the field of acoustics, there's two things you got to think about. There's the physical pressure wave that's being that goes into the microphone, but there's also the mechanism of human hearing, and those work differently. In order for a sound wave to get into your brain, it has to go through the ear canal, which is a tube. A basic level physics class will teach you that sound in an open closed tube has certain frequencies that it amplifies. It goes through your ear canal, it goes through the ossicles, which also provide an amplification of some frequencies better than others, and it goes through another amplification process in the hair cells. Don't want to get too far into the weeds in the science, but there are different filters that we apply to mimic the human hearing mechanism. One is the A weighting filter, which mimics human hearing at lower intensities. One is the C weighting filter, which mimics human hearing at higher intensities. And what all that is to say is quieter sound levels, when you are speaking to another person, you hear different frequencies at different loudnesses than at louder levels. So for example, if you're at a dance club and there's bass music, you'll hear the bass music a lot better at a higher amplitude than you would if the bass music was in a building, a closed door, and you're down the street, than if you're in the building where it's happening. At different amplitudes, the ear filters sound differently. So we recommend filters both using an A-weighted and a C-weighted filter to account for that. I feel like I didn't cover that very well. I'm happy to answer any questions about why we recommend that. We recommend incorporating a time averaged limit. So sound level meters come with several different noise metrics that you can use. This is just elucidating the noise metric that we would recommend based on industry best practices for measuring sound. And we also recommend different daytime and nighttime limits. I feel like you have to be a nerd to be into acoustics, and I struggle with breaking something super complex down into simple everyday language. But with sound, it's not just the level, it's also the duration. And so the recommendations that we provided are kind of technical, but they're really easy to implement in practice. You just click that setting on your sound level meter and measure it that way. And that's like an industry standard way of measuring it, to summarize those recommendations. Okay. We recommend that in the noise ordinance, it specifies where the noise is to be measured. It makes a big difference whether you're measuring it. It can make a big difference whether you're measuring it at a property line or at the nearest building. And so we typically recommend measuring at the property line of the complainant's property. because a person should have the right to enjoy enjoy their outdoor spaces as well as their indoor spaces. Specifications for the time period over which sound is to be measured. Kind of went over that a little bit, but if you measure for too short of a time period, then a small fluctuation can really offset the measurement. But if you measure for too long of a time period, then an officer is spending more time on a sound call when there may be a more pressing matter that he needs to attend to, saving lives, writing speeding tickets. I don't know what they do. So to find kind of a good balance between taking an accurate measurement and not taking too much of an officer's time, we recommend measurements for at least 2 to 5 minutes for enforcement purposes. Okay. A noise ordinance should consider the ambient sound levels. Ambient is defined, I get into some technical definitions here for ambient and residual sound. Basically, over time, cities get louder, more people move there, there's more cars driving faster down the roads, and so we'll see the background noise levels over time can creep up and even surpass the noise limits. And so in the case that happens, what's typical and what we see in other cities is that the ambient noise level becomes the standard if the ambient noise level is higher than the standard. So if the noise standard is 45 decibels, but even in the dead of night with nothing going on, it's already 52 dB, then it doesn't make sense to hold someone to a 45 dB standard because you can't measure that. You can only measure down to the ambient. So we recommend they consider that. If the residuals, and as well as what Deputy Chief Lazowicki was saying, you should take into consideration how loud it is at that place without the noise level that someone's complaining about, without the noise source that someone's complaining about. We recommend considering impulsive noise, which is noise that's really high amplitude, really short duration, like a gunshot. Gunshots, if you fire one gunshot in an hour, and you look at the time waveform, you're going to see like a really sharp peak. But if you take like an hour-long measurement, it's going to spread that sound energy on average out. But so because of the way it's measured, it should be considered separately than typical noise like traffic or music or other things like that. Okay. That being said, we recommend including exemptions to a noise ordinance, right? If one of the challenges with implementing a noise level that you would be able to have an officer measure is there are some things that it could prohibit entirely if they're not exempted. So we recommend exempting power tools, lawn maintenance equipment when used during allowed hours. And this is seen throughout the country. You're allowed to use your lawnmower, you're allowed to work with a drill or whatever you need to maintain your property, as long as you do it during reasonable hours, 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. during the week, or 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends, etc. We recommend exempting construction noise as long as it takes place during allowable times of days and days of the week. You're allowed to, if your house burns down, your construction crew is allowed to rebuild it as long as they do it during reasonable hours, because it's a temporary noise source. Construction doesn't last forever, except on major roadways. Noises from activities for school, government, or community groups. If there's a Hullabaloo festival or a city parade, sanctioned parade or something, school parades, school football games, or other government activities, they can have exemptions. Safety signals, emergency generators, storm warning sirens, authorized testing. We work with a lot of people, a lot of clients of ours are putting in emergency generators, and when an emergency generator goes in, it has to cycle, even when there's not an emergency, every once a week or once a month in order to make sure that it's going to be ready during an emergency. So that should be allowed as long as it's during regular hours. Noise created by utilities, garbage collection, aircraft, or trains should be exempted. Regular traffic noise should be exempted, and special events. For vehicular noise regulations, we recommend including language to prohibit the operation of vehicles without exhaust mufflers designed to prevent excessive or unusual noise, and vehicle noise limits based on the size, type of motor vehicle, and based on the speed limit where the offense takes place. Vehicle noise is really tricky because there are a lot of different things that affect how loud a car is, including how fast it's going, what kind of vehicle it is. Is it a semi? Is it a motorcycle? Is it a scooter? Is it a car? So we provided these recommendations, and I guess the meat and potatoes is in these two tables here. So the levels that we recommend based on the measurements that we performed in the city of Flagstaff are at night from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. we recommend a 50 dBA, 65 dBc standard measured at the complainant's property line. And during the daytime, it goes up 5 dB. For a mixed use area, it'd be a 55 dBA, 70 dBc standard, and it goes up 5 at night, and it goes up 5 dB during the day. For a commercial area, it's typical that in a commercial zoning, you're even louder than residential, so 5 dB up from that, and the same levels day or night. And then for an industrial area, 75 dBA, 90 dBc at day or night. Okay. Our recommendation for vehicle noise limits: for vehicles with a manufacturer's gross vehicle weight rating 6,000 pounds or more, any combination of vehicles towed by such motor vehicles, or any motorcycle other than a motor-driven cycle, moped. 88 dBA for a speed limit of 35 miles per hour or less, and 92 dBA for a speed limit of more than 35 miles per hour. Any other motor vehicle and any combination of vehicles towed by such, 82 and 86. So these are our recommendations provided just as a third party based on the measurements that we performed in the city of Flagstaff and based on noise regulations that we have read, studied, and gone over in other cities throughout the country, and also based on industry best practices. So, thank you.
All right, so if you have a question, please raise your hand if you're in the room. Sean's in the back. He'll come to you with a microphone so folks online can hear the conversation, and the recording will pick it up as well.
Thank you. Yeah, where to begin? Number one, I definitely urge City Council to pass a real noise ordinance for Flagstaff. It's helpful to have those models of similar type cities in your study, so thanks for including those. My main concern is vehicle noise, so I'll get to that. First of all, one of the unfortunate things about the study was the measure made at Thorpe and Mars Hill that were made at midday on an idle day, and that is not the times when we have had complaints, as you, Officer Musselman knows, and all the police we have called repeatedly, and we know the times of day when this is happening. It is not 11:30 in the morning. On an idle day. So we're up against a park, and I'll get back to that in a minute, but I really hope, and I know you couldn't measure everywhere, but we need to be looking at the places that are problem areas to narrow this thing down a little bit for enforcement. In a couple of the ordinances, I'd just like to comment that in the Sedona Ordinance, the first paragraph says no unnecessary, excessive, and offensive noise from all sources. And I think that's a really important statement, and I hope that our ordinance would start with at least that concept. for any motor vehicle, again from the Sedona Ordinance, must have muffler working, no excessive noise or any cutout, bypass, or muffler modification. My understanding is that's state law already. We need to codify that for the city of Flagstaff, and it seems to me that the police could start with that very statement, that you cannot, and the cars we're hearing obviously have modified mufflers. There's just no normal car that sounds the level of the cars that are going on our streets. Also, Sedona Ordinance for residential areas, nothing that, quote, disturbs the peace and quiet or discomfort, annoyance to any reasonable person. I kind of consider myself a reasonable person. I lived in this place for 30-some years. And yeah, Flagstaff's getting busier, it's getting noisier, but this is excessive, and what I would say your category of impulsive noise is these cars that are roaring by in the afternoon with modified mufflers meant to cause me, a reasonable person, great pain. The Boulder Ordinance says, first of all, they do go with lower decibel standards overall, and I support that. They also say anything, quote, so loud that it materially interferes with or disrupts another individual in their home. Absolutely important language there. They do provide for one-time warnings, first-time offense, and I do not agree with that. We got to come up with a reasonable fine that's going to make people pay attention to this. Sedona is excessive. I think, correct me, they say $2,500 for a first offense. I think that's a little draconian, but we can come up with something that's going to be enforceable and a deterrent for the fine. Address amplified noise, electronic amplified noise. So that raises a couple more questions for me from your recommendations. Why would special events be exempt under this ordinance? I don't think that's a good idea. Our parks are where we stage special events for the most part, and many of these are parks within town surrounded by residential areas, and some of our biggest complaints have been special events that have amplified music. You got, yeah. So,
There's already an ordinance that covers special events with certain decibel
okay,
requirements.
is
So
that
that's
just
why
for Wheeler, or is it for all the parks?
it's for
okay,
all parks.
great,
So we
okay.
already have that in our
Thank you.
ordinances.
I hope that goes into the new ordinance. Why are parks classified commercial? It makes no sense to me you'd call a park a commercial area and apply commercial standards. That just doesn't compute for me, but I think parks and open spaces ought to be a separate category. They start out quiet and they should be quiet, and that leads me to my next question. How to clarify if you're in a residential area that borders a park? If we're supposed to take measurements from our property and we're up against Thorpe Park, are you applying a residential decibel level, or are you applying, quote, commercial, but I think should be a park noise? We're right on the edge, and our biggest problem are people going back and forth on Thorpe Avenue on the border between our neighborhood and going to Mars Hill and going to the ball fields. So somehow I would like to see that clarified. Maybe we're a mixed use, but then that puts us out of residential and out of commercial. So I'm really not sure how that works. I hope that that can be answered. And those are my big comments, but thank you for all the effort on the study. I hope it will go somewhere with council.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank all the council members who I see here. I know you've gotten a lot of emails from me, and I really appreciate you being here. And I have just a couple of comments. Thank you again for this study. I think it's beautiful, and I think one of the things residents have been saying over and over again is we're not reinventing the wheel here. These ordinances exist, and you kind of brought that here tonight, and we can see that there are reasonable ordinances that people are using and could work for our city also. So I really appreciate that. I have one issue. One of the things that you said is that there's a. Do you want to, Sean? Thank you. Sean's taking my baby. He's a really good one, too. I'm biased, but one of the things that you said about coming on a call is that the calls are investigation only. So anecdotally, the last time that I was really driven out of my mind by noise, He had 104 fever. I had 101 fever. I was laying on the floor of his room just to be in the same room with my baby while he's sick. And the noise from the mayor, specifically the bass, so I'm glad to hear there are different measurements for things, was so loud and so strong that I was literally shaking on the floor of my baby's room as I tried to sleep next to him with 104-degree fever. Calling on that, as having an officer come into my house, right? First of all, unsafe for the officer because we've all got COVID. Second of all, unreasonable because it's midnight, literally. And then, so I don't know if there's something we can do about that. I think maybe, to the point of having a pretty strong fee, that might help something like that so that it's just happening at midnight to begin with. It's not happening in the middle of the night. That's one of the real problems. I have another similar kind of point along the lines of what do we count as? So like my residence was built in 1896. It's zoned community commercial, but it's grandfathered in residential, and it's on a street of residences that are similarly zoned. So that brings up an interesting question when you have something like our kind of bizarre, really old residences in the middle of downtown noise. I think that the events ordinance that we have is great, and I would just say that as a downtown resident, I do feel a little differently about that than the previous speaker. I'd love to hear that there's an event ordinance. We need those to be at a reasonable level, but we also need to support, the community is a vibrant, artistic community, and a lot's going on. Yeah, I also just want to say I agreed with the previous speaker about the, reasonable enjoyment. I have been sitting in my garden on a Sunday, and I'm not sure whether or not the music would have been an unreasonable volume, but the lyrics I was listening to, especially if this guy was 4 years older, were absolutely pornographic. So I would say, like, we need something in the ordinance that speaks to our ability to reasonably enjoy our own properties and sit out there without something like that. And then I think, duration is also important. I don't know how that is laid out in the ordinance, but the last time that we had a really bad noise problem, it literally lasted from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. And we called once the police, and because there is no fine, which again, I'm just going to encourage a fine, because there was no fine, that business turned their music down for 15 minutes. And then as soon as law enforcement was gone, turned their music back up again. So there's a real lack of respect, unfortunately, for law enforcement and also disinterest in being neighborly. So I think a strong fine is the only way that we're going to get any response. And I think that's all I have to say. I took my notes while chasing a baby, so I apologize if it was disjointed in any way. Okay.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
Thank you. I've got several questions. First question, do we know how many noise complaints you've taken in the last 6 months? A number approximate. Okay. That wasn't the question, I was asking if.
No, the answer is no, we don't have that with us. We could probably run the numbers and figure it out, but can't get that to you tonight.
This isn't part question, part statement. So we know these guys cost $18,000, right, to do this noise study. That was published in the newspaper. We're gonna pretend the Daily Sun was accurate. How much dollars do you think we're going to spend on training, equipment, all of this, lock, stock, and barrel when all is said and done? Just out of curiosity.
Probably initially about 20,000, I think is what we figured.
It was close to that.
And that exceeds your yearly training budget, right, when you add in?
Oh, that part of the budget's already been approved.
Okay, again, yeah, just asking the question. So we can kind of put some things in context, right? We're putting a lot of money, man hours into something that we don't know exactly how big a problem it is. It's certainly massive to somebody, but you know, there's how many thousands of residents in Flagstaff, just looking for some sort of relativity there. Okay, next question I had was, and this is something that has been bothering me for a little while, and we've had a lot of back and forth. My patio at one of my locations permitted for 79 people. If I'm not making noise, we know I'm not holding a party. A judge already told us that, right? I'm not holding a party. 79 people are on the patio. The establishment's not making noise, the speaker's on, but those 79 people are in a race outside if talking, how that escalates. Who's guilty of breaking the noise ordinance then? The 79 people?
I would say the business that's allowing the 79 people to be there.
But if the city is, it sounds like a taking. So just make that statement out loud. 79 people I've been permitted to have on my patio. They're out there on doing normal things and and they're loud. We are supposed to be the shh, please, as the business owner now?
Yeah, the ordinance doesn't make a difference whether it's your people or what the source of the noise is, whether it's your speakers, whether it's you with the bullhorn, whether it's a kid with a whistle.
So this should be a giant red flag to every business in town. You have a loud customer, you can be cited. Boy, that does sound like a taking. I know Marianda shook her head at me, but that's no other way around it. I can't have a patio anymore.
You can trespass that patron from your business and then you wouldn't be held responsible.
79 people that you've been told you can have in your business, you're going to trespass all those people because they're having conversation.
Or you could ask them to come inside, or you could try and monitor it as needed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I live on West Cherry Avenue near Thorpe Park, close to Mars Hill. I really appreciated the City Council listening to this issue that I brought up 2.5 years ago. And when it was first brought up, it was about unintentional vehicular noise. And the police department was good enough to draft a document addressed primarily at vehicular noise. I totally empathize with the woman who, thank goodness, is over her fever and still bothered by the noise near her residential house. I totally empathize. But that being said, I really appreciate what I think is that, or I really believe that these are two totally different issues. One is vehicular noise. The other is noisy whatever, businesses, stationary objects. When you're dealing with a car in the lane next to you, which with the decibel meter that I bought might be 105 decibels, that's dBA, and your ears are hurting. Damage may not occur until 110, 120, but it's painful to listen to that. It's painful to hear a car in the next lane, what, 20 feet away from me, creating a noise that distracts me. Fortunately, I've not run off the side of the road in disgust, but at times I've wanted to. I don't understand how the police department could be expected to enforce vehicular noise in any way, shape, or form like they would enforce residential versus business noises. It seems that the noise of a motorcycle going by you at 95 decibels is instantaneous, and while I can hear him half a mile away still, it's going to be hard for me to get home and call the police department and wait for the police to show up and describe the noise and expect that same or a different motorcycle to come by in order to get their ticket. Other people talking have been correct. There are predictable places and times where vehicular noise will happen. The egresses from the university, Santa Fe, I should be allowed to drive on those without cringing the whole way. It ruins my experience within Flagstaff. Thank you.
I thank you for taking the time to stick with this. It's a tough one. I agree with my neighbors that the business noises are very different from vehicle noises, and they really have to be separated out. And the police department should have a lot of data on when we are always calling you, because we've been calling for like 5 years all the time. One time my husband called recently and the dispatcher could hear it through the phone. So the noise is really, really unpleasant. It's probably not healthy. It's moving, but it also shows that these people are driving dangerously. So I noticed today that like the speed limit on 180 has been increased from 40. It becomes 45 much like right after the school. And so when people are accelerating, like you can have a noisy vehicle, but you don't have to drive it noisy. So when they're accelerating hard, especially when the speed limits are higher, we hear it. And I hear 180 down the street here. I hear Milton, I hear 66, what we call the racetrack going up Mars Hill and Thorpe Road. And I don't know, the data will tell you when the study should be there because it's really predictable. The high school kids are really bad and the high school people know it. Weekends are really bad because I think people come up here and then they love to drive up Mars Hill, especially if they have motorcycles. So yes, June is quiet. I have a bunch of notes because the students are gone. We were down at the Verizon store on University a month or so ago. The noise was unbelievable with those students going in and out of campus. Let's see. So if I heard you correctly, with the zones, there should be a different decibel noise level in residential areas than commercial areas. And I don't think I heard that. I don't know how you're going to do this with the decibels with vehicles. You're the professionals, you can figure it out. But you do have data about when it's bad. And the data is only as good as if you're there at the right times and asking the right questions. So those are most of my comments, except for that I think the city's motto has to do with quality of life, and this is definitely a quality of life issue. When people are driving dangerously, people with children, it's not good, and pets. It's a way of living in this community that is something different than what we had before, and it's degrading this town, and we're not as good a place because of this. So thank you.
So we're going to go online. We've got 2 folks with their hands up. The first one is Tyler. Go ahead, Tyler. Yeah, we'll come back to you.
Hi, thank you. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
First question I have is why are the noise limits, why should they exempt vehicles based on their weight? My initial thought on reading that part is why should someone get a free pass just because they bought a larger personal vehicle? But maybe there's something I'm missing there. Next part is just a comment. So my personal experience is that vehicle noise, which may be the harder one to regulate, but it is the most consistent and bothersome source of disruptive noise for me. So if there are a lot of controversial pieces to this, feels to me like there's a lot of alignment on moving forward with regulating vehicle noise first. And that's all.
Thank you, Tyler. We have Candace.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking to you here today as a homeowner in the Southside neighborhood, a supporter of businesses, as the owner of a business and a nonprofit myself, a lover of music and nightlife. I'm also here to say us and our neighbors are in support of a noise ordinance that can be enforced objectively. I can only speak for the Southside neighborhood, which is very different than the downtown area. The Southside is mostly residential dwellings, many of them built before zoning was established, and zoning is different here in comparison to downtown. All we're asking is to be able to enjoy our home the way we did when we purchased it. The Southside neighborhood deserves the same quality of life and attention the residents in more affluent areas in Flagstaff do. We deserve to be able to enjoy our homes, sleep, and not have to attend to a child that can't sleep or relax due to the music coming from a neighboring establishment. We deserve to be here, our child grow up here, and us grow old here. Change can be scary. If you lived here in 2004, Flagstaff extended last call until 2 a.m. Per the Daily Sun, many bars were opposed to it. But now you wouldn't know any different. What us and our neighbors are asking for is not unreasonable, nor a personal attack on any business. It is a quality of life issue. This problem will likely only get worse over time, and it's long overdue for it to be addressed. And I also want to second that I do feel strongly that there needs to be a different approach when an officer has to come out. It is very difficult to have an officer have to enter the house, especially when you make a call and sometimes the officer, for reasons we completely understand, can't get out to the call for maybe an hour after. We're looking at midnight, 1 o'clock. But all of us over here, my neighbors and my family, we're in full support of this, and we appreciate all the work that's gone into it. Thank you.
My name is Karan. I'm a local business owner and also a resident of the downtown Cherry Hill area. This whole thing just seems so complicated because it seems like there's so many issues that are making one decision happen. And just to simplify and just to get my head around it, it seems like, first of all, it's a car noise issue, which as a downtown owner with a baby in my house, I totally understand 110%. Like that would be very difficult for me too. But then we're talking about South Side versus the whole downtown, which is also very confusing to me. It's like we have houses on the South Side which are getting affected by the businesses, but then that doesn't represent the whole downtown. So that's also another thing that's very confusing to me. And then lastly, and the reason that I bring up the confusion is because I'm sitting here in this seat and I'm thinking about investing more money in downtown Flagstaff. And I'm thinking here, hey, should I really be spending the money? Because I own the Maloney's building right next to Atria. And I'm sitting here and being like, hey, should I really be spending all this money to have another hurdle to run a functioning business? And do I really want to be in the business of managing people's voices to be a successful business? So should I look at a different way of like, maybe we make that into, a different kind of business for regardless of if it's an attraction to Flagstaff. So for me, it's just, this whole thing is just very baffling because I'm at the point where I finally got my plans approved and we've got all these things moving forward. I got the soil sample. I want to develop the basement and I want to make another staple attraction to Flagstaff. But I'm like, do I really want to spend all that money just to have another thing that's going to be a headache for me to run the business already in the tough circumstances of Flagstaff with everything else besides just the noise? So that's what I'm considering.
Thank you. I agree with most of everything that's been said on both sides here, and it's not easy for you to develop a plan that satisfies downtown businesses and residences. So I think we all agree that there's some difference and some real overlap in some areas. Also, I want to recognize, I know the police are sorely depleted and need more people, and that's a real problem. And this is not the biggest problem. I think we recognize that, but it is a big problem. I've been here 45 years, and boy, has that changed. I want to ask about two things. The first one is regarding festivals. I live not that close to Thorpe Park, and I don't mind hearing the music just as well as I don't mind hearing music from a car, but I want to hear the melody. I don't want to just hear the rack and rock and bass with no melody. And I get that from the festivals, and it really bothers me that the plan for the annex of Thorpe Park has a music venue that points the speakers from the stage directly at residential areas. Calm down. I'll try. I think that's a poor design, and it's going to give us a lot of problem because acoustically speaking, bass sounds, lower frequency sounds travel farther and louder than higher frequency sounds. And that's part of the problem with vehicular noise. So festival noise bothers me. If we were to call during the allowed festival hours, from which even community groups are totally exempt, apparently, would someone have to come to my house and measure it? Or could they go over closer and ask them to just turn the bass down?
So the current regulations for special events, the amplification must end at 10 p.m. Decibel limit is 90 and it's measured 100 feet from the speaker. So those wouldn't come to your house.
Oh, I'll be calling
And
even
at
more.
Wheeler Park, it's less because it's bounded by neighborhood. So at Wheeler Park, amplification must end at 9 p.m. and the decibel limit is 85, measured 50 feet from the speaker. So that's already in law. What this one's more to address is, say, a car club shows up to the park without a special event permit and they start rocking the place. Then this nuisance noise ordinance would apply. You could call us and we'd come out and take the measurement from your house.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then regarding the vehicle noise, just like Dr. Collier mentioned, I don't understand how that can ever be enforced when I'm sitting at an intersection and someone drives up behind me thumping and my mirrors are vibrating. I can feel it in my bones. The sound is deafening, but I can't call you because I'm driving. And even if you did, we'd all be gone by the time anybody could get there because it's really not the most important thing in the world. So what would happen? I live next to a Little League park, and it's very predictable by like 5 minutes when those kids get out of high school a block away and they drive over there and do donuts in the dirt and make, again, not a big problem, dust, but the noise is deafening. Can I call and ask for someone, if you don't have anything more important, which is more important, to come over there and just wait right before school's out and before school starts in the morning?
Yes, you can. It's been our experience that when we're there waiting, such events don't happen. But
Imagine.
that necessarily wouldn't fall under this. That would fall under other traffic violations, criminal damage, reckless driving, et cetera. That's
Well,
how we
but
would address those.
it is that, but it's also just the noise of their glass packs 20 feet behind my house in a gravel parking lot. There's a place to hide.
Sounds like an undercover operation.
I don't want to hog the mic. I've been accused of that. But just let me relate a really quick story. When we came to City Council about the vehicle noise around Thorpe, they said, first thing, well, you've got to get their license numbers. Trying to get license numbers of a car going 50 in a 25-mile zone with a completely loud muffler is detrimental to my health. However, we, 4 of us have been so harassed by this. We've gone out in the middle of the street, bodily stopping a car that is doing this, and we surround them. We ambush them. It's unbelievable. I can't believe I'm doing it. And I get, like Bonnie, really upset, and I'm in their face going, what is going to happen to your life if you kill a kid on this street? And I just say it, and they stop, and they look at me for just a minute, and then I go, what's your name? Where did you get this car? I mean, this car is nicer than any car I ever owned in my life, still. And they listen. One guy even gave us his name and told us when he was 6 months old, or 6 years old, he was hit by a car. And I'm going, wait a second, why are you doing this? We're going to report you to the police. We've been asked to give them your license number. We're going to call the principal. The principals of Flag High have been really cooperative with this. They go, yeah, we know, we're talking to the people. But I want you to know what's happening to us in our neighborhood, on our streets, and the extent we're going to, which is dangerous to us. I mean, that kid he's learned. He's filming me with his phone. I'm going, stop that. You can't do that without my permission, but that's the world now. And we cannot do that. That's dangerous to us. It's dangerous to the driver. It's dangerous to our neighbors' kids who are out there on their skateboards. I mean, God, just imagine. It makes me shake to think about a child being killed on our streets. I wouldn't know what we would do. So we have got to do something about this. I mean, this may not be top of the line urgent situation, but it's getting serious and it's real. We've got to do something. And it needs to have teeth, and it needs to, whatever it costs for the police to be able to enforce this, we got to do it before somebody gets killed. It's that simple.
Tyler, I want to check with you. Did you still have a question or comment, or is your hand up from the last time?
I apologize. My hand is still up from the last time. I do have a comment I can add though. I found some of the stories very interesting about dangerous vehicles driving over the speed limit, which by doing so, they also generate a lot of noise. I just like to say, I think a lot of that could be addressed also through traffic calming measures, things that physically slow down drivers on roads. The primary purpose of that is to improve safety, but I think there is a side benefit there of reducing speed to also reduce noise levels. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands in the room. There's nothing else online. Do we have any closing statements from Deputy Chief Leswicki or Sam?
I don't.
Oh, sorry, there is one more hand. Oh, a couple more hands. All right.
Thank you. When might we expect the process to be completed and some kind of enforcement to begin?
So we're scheduled to come back to City Council for a similar discussion of the noise study, and that's on October 18th. And then we will draft an ordinance after that work session, and then come back sometime in the near future as soon as we can get back on calendar.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the timeline for the draft of the ordinance, that's all. So
Also, once City Council, once we have an ordinance ready, there's a first read and a second read, so there is that process. Then once a final ordinance is approved, it goes into effect 30 days after that.
Got one more.
Yes, and then if it does get passed, then there will be a lot of training taking place. And we acknowledge it isn't without challenges. I mean, getting a license plate will certainly help us, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you to put yourself in harm's way, because standing in the middle of the street blocking a car is against the law too. So I don't want to get you in trouble. And it's not against the law for people to film you if you're in.
So just to back up the traffic problem issue, throughout the neighborhoods that I go in are yellow signs in people's front yards that ask people to slow down. It's all over town. It's really a problem. I think when these kids are not stopped from doing this, they just keep doing it. So my question after that is, you got feedback tonight. We sort of hinted that you have data that may not have been included in the traffic study from all our calls to the police department. Is tonight's information or that data from our calls going to be incorporated and this plan revised, or are you just going to move forward and ignore everything you heard tonight?
So no, we have council members in attendance, and they will be the ones making the final determination on the ordinance. So we may make additional recommendations. Some of the neighborhood data what you're describing is speeding, which this is more about the noise. And I get that it's one and the same depending on, but it's not always the same. So we have to be careful that we're not exaggerating the situation. So we're trying to, specifically, this is just focus on the noise ordinance. And why these two items are tied together, because they both involve a new ordinance and both involve decibel readings and training. So that's why these are tied together.
Can I make a comment, please? A clarification from what you just described about speeding versus noise. Are there special words that we should use when we are making a call to the police department about the racetrack happening? Is that enough of a word to say that this is noise as well as speeding?
I mean, yes, if you report it as reckless driving, that would probably be better than you saying there's loud cars going down my street.
Well, I
That's
assume
what
it's
you're trying to
reckless.
get
Have I seen these vehicles? No. They're racing by. I can't, in my call, give any description about what's happening because I don't see it, I just hear it.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think that's a speeding issue or a neighborhood traffic issue. I mean, it can be tied to the noise, depending on how fast they're going, if that's pushing their exhaust levels above the dBA limit. So this will be an additional tool to help with that. But I don't know that data is super relevant to this discussion. But I do appreciate you calling in, because then we can track it and we can work on it from that angle.
Okay, so I would say it is relevant because in the wintertime when all our windows and doors are closed and we can hear them racing around the neighborhood, the noise is really loud. So another time that you merely should be aware of is every time on the weekends and evenings when things end in the ball fields at Thorpe and they come racing down Aztec like you can't believe, past homes with no one saying don't do that. So that's another time and place that you need to be aware of. And in terms of what happens with the city yard, which is part of the park, we're very concerned about this traffic, very concerned, because it's really going by so many homes to get there and to come back. And if they leave for lunch or whatever, and they're probably drinking, so they're driving recklessly. But what gives us the ability to say something is reckless? I mean, I know what I think is reckless. How do we deal with that?
You call us, don't go out and stand in front of them, please.
Well, we're so frustrated that we are pushed to our limits. I was in tears one day in my garden because I'm so sick of this. It's been going on for years, and we have called and called and called. And I don't want anyone to get hurt, and I don't want to live with it anymore.
I hear your frustration. My answer is we'll try and do our best, but you have a new crop of students that shows up every year, and re-education and re-education and re-education, it's ongoing. So I don't think the problem can ever be solved. Can we manage it better? Probably, and we hope to. So thank you.
With this new ordinance that we're going to draft, will there be anything regarding people who have grinding the axe per se and like to call the police officers and abuse the privilege by making these noise complaints, targeting certain businesses maybe? How are you going to be able to weed out an anonymous caller who's going to just keep calling to poke the bear just to hurt the businesses? Because that's really the bottom line here, is all these businesses financially are going to be hurt, which also in turn is going to hurt everything as a trickle-down effect.
So that's the value and objective standard. If they call out and say this music is disturbing and we go out and the limits are under the standard, then it ends up being an unfounded report. They can't remain anonymous if the reading has to be taken from their property line. So if they call and don't want to leave their name, we may go and we may run a reading, and we may come in and ask you, hey, you're above the reading, please turn it down before we get a call. And we'll probably address it that way as best we can. Is that fair?
Just back to the confusion and how to simplify it, just so I can get my head wrapped around it. Is there a way to construct the ordinance so that it can be directly correlated with car noise, or it can be directly correlated with the south side problem, not a whole downtown problem, or it can be, can there be a way that you can break up the system for how we are implementing the noise ordinance so that it can be fairly treated? Because it sounds like to me, again, a lot of the people that are living in downtown, including myself, it's a car issue, but then why punish or put a business that has never had a noise complaint in the same parameters as a car when we're generating revenue for the city and ourselves and employment? But is there a way to construct a noise ordinance so that it can not just be an overall spectrum of noise? It can actually be, broken up to the way to take care of the issues, instead of just a general kind of way of like, hey, this business is loud, but the business is not actually the problem. It's the 10 other cars that are drinking and driving and, whatever is happening. I don't know. But is there a way that we can construct it that way?
So in ordinances, in the drafts we've already kind of talked about previously with council, it's separate into the vehicle noises in one part and then the other noise restrictions are in another. We cannot restrict by area. There has to be equal application of the law. We can't just say it applies to this area of the city and not other areas of the city. So that is not a constitutional way to draft an ordinance.
That makes sense.
So what you see in terms of what's up here as the different tables, those are tables that can be put into the ordinance so that it's clear with regard to the vehicle noise is separate and then the rest of the noise, types of noise that can be heard would be in a different section. So I know you said it's confusing. Maybe it's not as confusing to those of us who've been dealing with it for a couple of years. Right. Because, we've been looking at the different ordinances, different cities, even within Arizona, outside of Arizona, working with MD Acoustics and their people, to discuss very different facets of this. So, we have been working on a draft. We do have, one that will be, eventually presented to council for council to make the decision as to what council feels is appropriate for our city.
Fair.
A quick question, Captain Musselman. Is it true under existing state law that it says you can't have a modified muffler? Is that grounds for stopping someone while we wait for an ordinance?
There is something in the state law, you can't drive a vehicle without a muffler or with a muffler cutout, although I don't know what a cutout is. And you're probably not gonna get too many officers crawling under somebody's car while they're still in the driver's seat to inspect that. So this just helps, it's less invasive to go under that. So this will help take enforcement without having to crawl under the car and be an expert on mechanics.
Okay, do we have any closing comments?
Thank you for your input. And again, if your business hasn't received any noise complaints, I don't see why an adoption of a noise ordinance is going to encourage people to make noise complaints when they wouldn't in the first place. And well, that's about it, really.
I'll make one more closing comment. Just as a third party observer, it's been interesting to be involved in this process, and I've enjoyed the community engagement, both just on all sides. And I've been really impressed with the city officials and especially the police and how much they care about the community and finding a solution that's best for everyone. And these are complicated issues, and some of them are very difficult to weigh how the enforcement would work, such as the vehicular noise. My hat's off to the city council, and unfortunately, when it comes to an issue like this, where there are competing issues on both sides, there are going to be compromises, and some people from each side may walk away unhappy. But that's the beautiful thing about America. We all get a voice. So I'd like to end with that.
Well, thank you everyone for attending today. Again, this recording will be added to our website, so if there's anything you want to go back to listen to, you're welcome to do that.